Well, joining me now to look at the week in federal politics and the government's response to the coronavirus pandemic are two members of the Parliamentary Press Gallery. Tonda Maccharles is a national political reporter for the Toronto Star, and Bob Fife is Ottawa Bureau Chief for the Globe and Mail. Both of you, thanks for taking the time.
Thanks
Happy
for
to be
having
here.
us, Martin.
Okay, let's start with something. It's just because we're getting news of this today, and that is that there are some communications and there's some press releases from the provincial premiers who are clamoring at they are reminding the Prime Minister of their desire and of his promise to have a meeting with regards to healthcare transfers. What do you make of that? Start with you, Bob.
Well, I'm a little taken aback by this, if I may say so, because the Prime Minister, since the pandemic, has been having almost weekly phone calls with the premiers. It's not as if they haven't had an opportunity to be able to raise this issue with them. I think this has a lot to do with the economic statement coming up that is going to be there, I'm assuming mid to late November, and that the premiers are trying to put a little bit of pressure on the Prime Minister to put more money in the pot for healthcare. But it's not as if these guys have not been talking. They've been talking almost every week.
Mm-hmm. Tonda, you've filed a lot of stories on provincial relations with the federal government. What do you make of it?
Yeah, no, I think this is the premiers kind of rattling Trudeau's cage, like Bob says, in advance of an economic update. However, look, they had agreed to have not just one of those weekly calls where 13 of them kind of get 20 minutes or 5 minutes. This is a full-on First Minister's meeting, sitting down, focused solely on the subject of healthcare transfers. And the provinces contend that really the federal government has really dropped the ball on its ongoing sustaining funding for the healthcare system. And they want it, they're jacked up to 35% of their funding. Right now, they claim it's, I think, around 22% or something, the federal transfer kicking into healthcare budgets. And that's the biggest rising, fastest rising portion of their provincial budgets. So this is going to be a really contentious meeting when they have it. I'm just surprised they haven't actually come up with a date. So it's kind of it was a bit of a, oh dear, politicians clutching their pearls and saying, oh, we don't have a date, They're really pressing the bigger issue, and they want to have a knockdown drag out with Trudeau. There
was that commitment to a formal sit-down meeting. I want to get to the government's response as we're now fully into the second wave. I mean, the figures are coming in every day. We have a more and more poignant reminder that we are really now in the thick of the second wave for most of this country, aside from Atlantic Canada. I'll start with you, Bob. What do you think are the biggest priorities and biggest challenges this week as this starts to unfurl across the country?
Well, I mean, one of the key things is testing. The government is only right now, there's only been a surge in contact testing of about 1,000. They're promising 6,000, but experts are saying that we need to do about 20 to 40,000 in the as winter approaches. We also have to make sure, and this is absolutely crucial, that we have enough beds and availability in hospitals to be able to deal not only with potential surge in patients who are having to go in to the hospitals to save their lives, but to make sure that a whole lot of other people who need surgeries and other kinds of medical emergencies are not left at home waiting. We know from the evidence that in the last shutdown is that a lot of people died because they held off from needed surgeries or other medical care because of the pandemic. So this is a very serious health crisis facing the country, not only economically but health-wise. And the provinces and the federal government need to work very cooperatively in working together to make sure that there is proper testing, contact tracing, and that the hospitals can handle what is expected to be over the next couple of months, a surge in people going to hospitals for not only flu, but for COVID.
Okay, Tonda, I have to mention an article you wrote this week because it was very interesting, because what you did was you got into a bit of the new dynamic in Ottawa with regards to the federal government response and how it's all playing out here in Ottawa. We saw the battle about the motion about healthcare information and disclosure of it, but you had an article which was about Patty Hajdu, the health minister. It was called The Disappearing Minister. Walk us through that.
Well, look, I just was struck, and I spoke to many people who have been at the senior levels of that department for the past 2 decades, and how this crisis, it normally would pose a big challenge for any minister, given that provinces are responsible for the frontline delivery of healthcare. But and what the role is of the federal government as a central coordinating agency in this thing. And all of them said to me that even in a crisis like this, where it falls to the provinces, that everybody's looking still for national leadership, and every one of them questioned what's going on, that there seems to be sort of a little bit of a, if you will, a lack of that. And what I was struck by is that, look, I think actually Patty Hajdu's a really capable person, but I think she's being drawn into some of the traps that the opposition is setting for her. And it's actually not working out well for either her or the government. And I was struck by how she had gone away and disappeared for a big chunk of time. It's not just that she was upstaged by Trudeau and Freeland and their management of this, but she was not seen, she was not present, she was not front and center with Dr. Tam to take the political questions. She gets very touchy, very sensitive. She's very partisan, and she should be, that's fine. But her responses in challenging, for example, reporters who questioned her reliance on Chinese data, her response to her opposition critic, and she's now facing a newly emboldened opposition with a new leader in Erin O'Toole and a new critic in Michelle Rempel-Garner. And so she's responding in ways that actually aren't serving her or her government's cause very well. To react against the effort by the combined opposition to get to some of the answers and demand accountability and transparency in documents, to respond in the way she didn't help their cause, and in the end, actually, I don't know if there was going to be any way to negotiate themselves out of that one, but now they're facing this enormous probe by the Health Committee into every aspect of their response. And, that's going to reveal some pretty interesting things, I think.
Okay, Bob, I want to turn to you for another aspect of it and another minister, and that is Chrystia Freeland. This week we saw her give a sort of a keynote speech to a group in Toronto outlining what was billed as the government's response to the coronavirus, economic response to the coronavirus, as a new finance minister. What do you make of that? A lot of people were saying that they wanted more specifics, and there's also reports that there's going to be something like $20 billion more structural, permanent change in funding, increased funding come the economic statement. What do you make of where she is going and what indication we're getting from Chrystia Freeland as Finance Minister and Deputy Prime Minister of the economic response?
Well, first of all, Martin, I just want to comment on Patty Hajdu. I think she has been a weak minister, and I think the government knows that she's been a weak minister. If you imagine if it had been Jane Philpott in that same role, I think it would be a completely different situation, and I think they need to think seriously about replacing her. As for Ms. Freeland, we're not going to get a lot of specifics right now because she's going to be giving us more information when we get an economic statement, and presumably a hell of a lot more when we get a budget. But what she said was, we are going to keep spending a lot of money. And you have to think about this when you consider the fact that we do need to make sure that we're not leaving people without any kind of a safety net. We have to protect businesses and people who lose their jobs. But we have to think about this in this sense. Canada is, of all the International Monetary Fund, of all the countries, Canada is the largest spender right now at about almost 20% of GDP. The United States is second at 18.7. Europe is about 10.7. So we're spending a lot of money, and I think that we need to ask ourselves as Canadians how that money should be spent. Did we need, for example, to spend $8 billion to provide students with money? Did we need to spend $1 billion on we? I think there needs to be some serious questions about how our money is being allocated. Yes, we do have to, and I don't think anybody disagrees with the fact that we do have to make sure that we provide support to the economy during this COVID crisis, but business leaders themselves are questioning how the government is spending money. And Ms. Freeland's solution so far, and seems to be one of the Prime Minister's office, which is spend, spend, spend. Is that the right way? I don't think it is.
You think we will get more details, at least beginning of details in the economic statement?
Well, look,
I'm
we're
not
gonna
sure
get.
what we're going to get in those
Yeah.
economic statements.
Tonda, last word?
Well, I think we'll get some more details, but we won't get, I think, what Bob is referring to, which is some kind of guardrail on the spending and something, a limit, a ceiling beyond which they won't go. I don't think we're going to see that.
Okay. This, something tells me that particular story is one that we will continue to pursue. I want to thank both of you. Thanks for taking the time.
Thanks, guys.
Thanks
Have
for
a good
having
weekend.
us on.
Thanks.